Welcome, everybody, to Dead Talk Live. And today we welcome Graham McTavish, who plays Sir Harold Westerling in HBO's House of the Dragon, which just concluded its first season this past Sunday. Graham, thank you so much for being our guest here today. Congratulations on the huge success of the first season of House of the Dragon. Now that season one is complete, what are your feelings on the success of this first season?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a strange thing whenever you're involved in something that is, really popular or successful with the audience. You don't really imagine it at the time. When you're making it, you sort of live in a strange bubble, I think, and you almost daren't hope that it's going to be as successful as this has been. It was the same with Outlander. When you're making these sort of things, you're just surrounded by people who are in the same bubble as you. That we're working hard. We're trying not to let the source material or the fact that there was a very, very, very successful previous series called Game of Thrones that came before us. And we tried not to let that interfere too much with what we were doing. But once it came out, you have no control over it after.
No.
And you just hope for the best, and it seems to have worked out.
It seemed,
I'm absolutely excited. Yeah,
gauging on everybody's reaction, I think it even exceeded HBO's expectation. Now, when you booked the role of Harold Westerling, were you a fan and familiar with the previous show you mentioned, Game of Thrones?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd seen all of Game of Thrones. In fact, yeah, I was a huge fan right from the very first season. And, it was something that I'd wanted to be a part of while they were making it. It was just that because I was doing The Hobbit, and then I immediately went on and did Outlander, and then I was doing Preacher, it meant that it was just impossible. So this was something that I'd spoken to the showrunner, Ryan Condal, about years previously, actually. Ryan and I had worked together. We did a pilot for NBC called The Sixth Gun, which never went to series, sadly. But Ryan and I formed a friendship after that. And he got me in Colony, which was another show that he wrote and was the showrunner on. And he spoke to me about this project. Oh, we had lunch in LA. I mean, well, it's got to be at least 5 years ago.
Wow.
And said that he was really hopeful, because at that time there were 3 shows that were in the running to be made as prequels to Game of Thrones. And he felt confident about it, but he said, when we do it, I really want you to be involved. And it's like one of those conversations that you have and you think, oh, well, that would be nice. And then, boom, you're in it. And I remember standing in the throne room set with Ryan, looking at these giant statues and looking at the Iron Throne at the end and saying, this is amazing.
It's like surreal.
Yeah, totally surreal. And I still talk to him about it. That it's a wonderful, wonderful example of somebody who had an idea, followed it through, worked incredibly hard, and was rewarded by it being actually made by HBO. So,
Absolutely. Yeah. So let's break down your character, okay? I see your character as one of very few, if not the only, honorable men on this show. How did you see your character when you first read him, when he was explained to you, and how did that influence on how you were going to portray him?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. He is pretty much the only decent human being in the entire show. I mean, he is surrounded by a sort of nest of vipers, really, who have. I mean, the thing about Harold is that he is the sort of representative of a sort of almost warrior monk order, the King's Guard.
Yeah.
I mean, when you get chosen to be a member of the King's Guard, you forsake money, title, relationships, marriage, any of those things, and devote your life to the service of the king. And in doing that, That is his singular purpose, is to protect the royal family. Everything, he has no other agenda. He's not secretly plotting like everybody else is to further his own interests. He wants to do what is best for Viserys and Rhaenyra.
Yeah.
Not so much Daemon. He's not so keen on
Yeah.
Daemon.
Damon doesn't
But
have a lot of friends.
yeah, yeah, yeah. He's not the kind of guy that has a lot of friends at his birthday party unless he's paying them to be there. Really.
Exactly.
Yeah, so Harold, and when I read it, I mean, the interesting thing about the character from my point of view is I don't get to play that many people who are very morally decent. They tend to be a little more complicated in their morality. But in this case, he was able to be present in everything. He heard and saw everything that went on.
Exactly.
And it's only really towards the end of the season that he reveals his pretty much contempt for a lot of the people involved.
And we're going to get to that in a little
Yeah.
bit. Now, this first season is really sort of broken up into two different halves. The first 5 episodes, we see the younger versions of some of the characters, and then the second half, we get to see them as adults. In the first 5 episodes, we see you sort of taking on a fatherly role with Princess Rhaenyra. How would you describe Westerling's relationship, and does he view Rhaenyra as sort of somebody he needs to protect?
Yeah, no, definitely he does. He definitely does. He has a great affection for her, and I think it's partly born of duty, his sense of duty, but also because he as a man has been denied the kind of relationship that many men have, which is to have children, to be married, to have, that kind of love in their life. I chose, certainly in my interpretation, to be somebody who really looked upon her, maybe not as his own child, but certainly somebody that he had that kind of feeling towards, a very sort of avuncular feeling. He wanted to always protect her, and that's why he's put into such a very, very difficult situation later on.
And that brings us to the next question. Episode 9, your character is brought to a crossroads, okay?
Yeah.
You're sitting in, the King Viserys is dead. They're having a meeting in the middle of the night. Everything is being kept secret. The king's death is being kept a secret. You're basically asked about your allegiance, okay? And that's when you make a stand and you say that I answer to the king. And until one is placed on the throne, I don't answer anybody. And then you turn in your white cloak. In that moment, what is going through your character's mind as you surrender your white cloak? And will he uphold his oath to whoever is placed on the Iron Throne? Or does his allegiance lie more towards Rhaenyra?
Interesting question. I mean, in terms of the cloak, the cloak really symbolizes Harold Westerling's entire life, really. That's to receive the white cloak, as we show with Kristen Cole earlier in the show. When you get that is bestowing upon you something that is bigger than you. Yeah, really, that you are part of something. It is, it's similar to regular military service, I suppose, but the difference with the King's Guard is really it's for life. Yes. You do that for life. You don't come to a point where, hey, now I'd like to start a family, so I think it's about time I hung up the cloak. No, there's no reason that you would ever do that. So for him to actually follow that through is hugely significant, and it would have been an awful moment for him. And I tried to play that. He's wrestling with so many conflicting feelings at that moment. He's being given orders. He's used to following them. He's surrounded by people that he has, devoted his life to. And suddenly he's being placed in a position where he has to honestly ask himself what the right thing to do is. Yeah. And, and I think what's great about his character is that he doesn't really hesitate, actually.
No.
There's no conflict in the end. It's clear what is the right thing to do, and that's what he does. As for the future, well, who knows? I mean, that's in the hands of the writers, really.
And I don't
But
think even Westerling knows what's going to
no,
come in
no,
the
no.
future.
I mean, absolutely. He walks out of that door, and all he's thinking of doing is getting as far away from these people as possible. And then he'll have some time to reflect upon what he's done and what the future holds for him.
If you
But
were to guess right now,
yeah,
do you feel that he still holds feels an obligation towards Queen Princess Rhaenyra?
yeah. I mean, I don't think it would be possible for him to forget that or move on from that. It's been, he has quite literally been a part of her life since she was born.
Yeah,
So it's you can't just switch that off, and I don't think when he's walking away that he's walking away from her. He's walking away from a situation that he was asked to be put in that he just couldn't follow through on.
absolutely. And this is a big credit to your acting. That really came through in your nonverbal expressions in that room in the middle of the night. Just the look of disdain that you had of what was going on in
Mm-hmm.
secrecy, them trying to place Aegon on the throne, locking people in their rooms. It was no dialogue in that point that
Mm-hmm.
came through your mouth, but just the look of disdain, how you just did not approve of how this
Yeah.
was being done in secrecy. I mean, excellent job. I mean,
Oh,
yeah. What kind of
thank you.
mindset did you go into to just bring that nonverbal acting to life?
Well, I mean, really, thanks for saying that, but it's really about really listening to what the other actors are saying.
Yeah.
Uh, I mean, that does your job for you. If you actually pay attention to what is happening and you're paying attention to it as the character, then there can only be really one reaction. And with Westerling, up to that point, there were plenty of moments where he felt disdain
Yeah.
and felt disappointment and maybe even anger. I mean, one of the earlier ones was when he saw Damon sitting on the Iron Throne.
Mm.
So he's not, he sometimes he lets those things through, but he really does cultivate a mask, really, most of the time of indifference, and that's partly what is, I guess, so shocking, not just in terms of the story, but to the other characters, because they're used to Westerling simply being essentially a function in the
Mm-hmm.
room. He's just like a dog, do that, do this, come here, fetch, sit,
Not a threat. Not a threat. Yeah.
not a threat at all.
Mm-hmm.
And for him to do that will definitely leave a mark
Mm-hmm.
on them. And also, he's a very, very skilled warrior
Yes.
and somebody who commands respect among many people. So they'll be a little bit concerned, I
Mm-hmm.
think, with his departure.
Now, one of the most compelling things about this franchise is going even back to Game of Thrones and into House of the Dragon is that no character is safe. Yeah, I mean, that's very true. Your character can be out just like that. When you booked the role, did you know you were going to make it through the first season alive?
I did. Yes,
Okay,
I did. Yeah,
okay.
Ryan made that very clear. Yeah.
And
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you're right. People are getting killed off all the time. I know. I think I can't remember who. There was a couple of people who got the chop that weren't expecting it. I think, but then and listen. I mean, Ryan could easily say that to me. Oh yeah. Harold survives till the end of the first season, but equally halfway through the season, he could go. You know what, Graham? We've decided that
mhm,
that Harold is going to die in
yeah,
episode 6. So you're never sure, and that's one of the great things from a viewing point of view. I mean, right from when I first saw the first season of Game of Thrones, when Sean Bean
mm-hmm,
gets beheaded,
yeah.
that was just so shocking.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Yeah.
nobody saw that coming. And
No.
going back to that again, that episode, that pivotal episode for your character in that room in episode 9,
Mm,
I think it
mm.
really sets up your character for a lot of growth moving on into the second season.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm
Mm,
very fascinated to see where they take Westerling moving
mm,
forward. They could
mm.
go in so many different directions, but
I know. Yeah.
now let's remove you as being a part of the show and let's just talk as fans for this next question. Let's talk about Queen Allison.
Yeah.
Older Allison is played by Olivia Cook, brilliant actress. Now, Allison seems like somebody who's just always trying to find her voice. She can't get out from under her father's uh, thumb.
Mm,
As a
mm.
fan of the show, when you're viewing her character, what are your interpretations of Queen Allison, and how do you see her?
Yes, it's very difficult. It's very interesting character because in some ways, she is being set up to be the antagonist to Rhaenyra.
Yeah,
But at the same time, she finds herself in an almost impossible position. She is always, I think, motivated by wanting to do the right thing.
exactly.
And people and events conspire to often undermine that. But that makes for a fascinating character. It'll be very interesting to see how that progresses as well, because two people who were childhood friends who are now placed on opposite sides.
Hmm.
I mean, this kind of thing runs through so many stories and so much real history.
Yeah.
What happened in the American Civil War, for
Hmm.
instance, when families were divided, people who'd grown up together suddenly facing each other on opposite sides of the battlefield. It's a similar kind of conflict for her to
Absolutely.
try and reconcile. So I think, yeah, it'll be very interesting to see where that leads.
A lot of people, I've heard a lot of people say that one of the biggest differences so far from Game of Thrones to House of the Dragon is there is much deeper character development in House of the Dragon. And I absolutely agree with that.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on the writing of the characters, your character, and how, each one was developed? They took their time. They didn't rush it through.
No, no, absolutely right. I mean, I've compared it before, really, to the sort of it's a family drama,
Hmm.
really. And if you remove the swords and the dragons and all the rest of it, it's a story that is relatable to any family.
Yeah.
That there are disputes, there are fallings out, there's rivalries, all of those sort of things that go on, and it's in the same way that you found with The Godfather, for
Yeah.
instance, The Sopranos. A lot of these kind of Succession. They all revolve around the family and the characters within that family, and House of the Dragon is part of that as well, I think, and that's what makes it very, very appealing, I think, to people.
Me too. I totally agree. Now you get to work with an amazing cast, crew. What kind of an effect does that have on you as an actor, coming to work every day and working with such professionals who are so good at what they do?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've been very lucky that way with projects that I've worked on. House of the Dragon, it was hugely beneficial that Ryan, in particular, was a massive fan of Game of Thrones. So he was writing it from a fan's perspective in many ways. In the same way that actually, when Peter Jackson, for instance, came to do Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit, he was a fan of those stories.
Absolutely, yeah.
Make those stories pretty much all his life. And it's the same with Ryan. He went and sought out George R.R. Martin when we were shooting in New Mexico on the pilot that I mentioned, and in order to set this whole thing in motion. But everybody else on that set, yeah, they were great. The cast, the crew, sometimes working under very, very difficult circumstances. I mean, not just circumstances related to COVID, but just the physical circumstances of making a show like that. It was not always comfortable, to to work in. But everybody really brought their A game to it, and I think it shows. Yeah,
Absolutely, definitely shows. Now, I can't let you go without asking you at least one Outlander question. I'm a huge, huge Outlander fan. You play Dougal Mackenzie. Now,
yeah,
Dougal Mackenzie, emotional, hot-headed,
yep,
stubborn. I
yep.
think he's a complete opposite of Westerling.
Yes,
Uh,
he is.
I mean, tell us about your time on Outlander. How much fun did you have playing Dougal Mackenzie?
Oh yeah, I mean Dougal's a great character because he's very complex. Sometimes people say to me, "Oh, he was a villain," and I'm like, no, he
No,
wasn't. Not a villain. He was much more interesting than that. He was much
yeah,
more complicated. And he's all of those things that you described. But he's also, loving, loyal.
loyal.
He's supportive. But he has all sorts of, inner conflicts. But for me, yeah, the experience was fantastic. And talking about, people that you're working with, I had such a great time working with that group.
Mm-hmm.
We all started that job together. And we were like a little family by the time we actually started filming, because we had a little kind of boot camp period where Sam, myself, Duncan Lacroix, Grant, and Stephen and Katrina, and Gary Lewis, we all got together and really bonded.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, the working environment was wonderful, and we had a lot of laughs.
I can
Lot of,
imagine. Do you enjoy doing period pieces like Outlander? And even though
yeah,
A House of the Dragon is a fictional time period, it's still like a medieval
yeah.
time. Yeah. Do you
Yeah,
enjoy
no, I
those?
mean, sure. The Hobbit. I do The Witcher, an Outlander. Yeah, I seem to have. It's like I now don't go to bed without a sword being by my side. It's kind of weird. I didn't. It's not planned, but I suppose it's a little bit like there's that law of attraction, really. That I do love those kind of shows myself.
Mm-hmm.
Those and straight out science fiction are my kind of favorite genres. I would say,
Yeah.
and it just so happens that I kind of ended up being a part of them, and it's wonderful. I love it.
It must be a dream come true. Graham, I want to thank you so much. It's been 22 minutes. It's flew by. I've had an amazing experience talking to you. I want to thank you so much. We're all looking forward to seeing what happens with your character moving into season 2. Because, like you said, of the complexity, the intensity of filming, we're not going to see it till 2024. But we can't wait to see where the story goes, where Westerling goes. A lot of possibilities. Do you have any final thoughts you want to share before we go?
Well, no, I mean only that I look forward to that just as much as you do, and I look forward to talking about that again in the future.
Absolutely. We look to having you back and talking about it. I want to thank our audience, those of you who are tuning in live, and those of you who will be watching this later on. On behalf of Graham McTavish and myself, stay safe and stay walking. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you.